morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, because we are all joining from different time zones. We thank you for attending today's webinar. We are all excited to learn from Lauren how to build a community and use it as tool for marketing and growing our business. So thank you, Lauren, for your sharing your knowledge. And before that, we just want to give a brief introduction about Cocotown because we found a lot of the registrants are not familiar with the Cocotown. So just give us like 3 minutes. We are not going to be long. The origin, the parent company, InnoConscious, was started in 1992. We started originally as just a trading innovative specialty food processing machines, primarily focused on one segment. That's a South Indian segment in USA. And then we grew the business, exporting to other countries, and also we had appointed a lot of dealers and distributed around the country to make it easier for people to have the service and other okay, they can buy it instead of getting it shipped and all those things. But in 2007, when the recession hit, everything changed because we had about 14 distributors, but the recession, people were not buying anything, so we had to think what to do to stay in business. So we were, over the years, we have been collecting information from customers. When we see a new name that's not a South Indian name, we call them and ask them, what do you use it for? So people were giving us a lot of different things that they were doing, anywhere from making chocolate and the nut butters, rice milk, the Nepalese food, the Chinese food, the, Mexican food, Filipino food, everything. And even there was one lady in New York. She was using the sphagnum moss that grows in the park, and then she just brings it and makes her own facial pack. And she said that was the best quality she had. And then when we were trying to pivot, we were looking at where should we focus our energy. Then we realized, chocolate was interesting to us because the chocolate, people could not make in small scale. They had to have millions of dollars and a huge facility and a lot of money to start the business. So we said, well, we will miniaturize the process so anybody can start making chocolate. And also at the same time, we also were three goals: sustainability on environment, customer business, and agriculture. So the environment, we use only stainless steel and very minimum plastic in our machines, so they are lasting. People who bought in 2005, 2006, they're still using it. And the customers business, we are always interested making sure our customers are thriving in their business. So we help them. We had the bean to bar workshop. It's like a boot camp, 3-day boot camp. We used to teach them everywhere, everything from selecting the beans all the way to writing business plan, wrapping the bars, everything. But with the pandemic, we had to stop it for the last 2 years. And then agriculture. People, before chocolate makers came in and started making this fine chocolate, craft chocolate, bean to bar, a lot of different names that we call. And 𝗬𝗂𝗋𝗋, the Fine Chocolate Industry Association, right now it's working on standardizing all this glossary. So that will be good. So then we all can start, talk the universal language. But the bulk chocolate makers, they were buying the beans in commodity prices. So the farmers were not getting compensated. They were trying to leave the farms, and but when the chocolate makers started buying the beans directly from the farmers, they are helping us to make the farming sustainable. So, and then this is the small timeline over the years. So we have patents on our machines, and we were the first company to start making the machines with the feedback from the chocolate makers, and then for the chocolate makers. So a lot of award-winning chocolate makers use our machines. And then, fast forward to 2020, then the pandemic all over the world, we had to again rethink our business. you know Unfortunately, we are in USA, and we got a lot of government assistance for the employees and for the small businesses. But we found that a lot of our customers in other countries, they did not get any assistance, and there were extended lockdown. Some countries like Philippines had more than 2 years of lockdown. So we said we could use this time for them to at least they can learn the new processes and the other things. They can network, so when the things open up, they'll be ready. So we came up with this Empowering Chocopreneurs webinar series, and we are fortunate because there were a lot of industry experts and other people who in different countries, they were willing to share their experience free of cost. So the participants, they can learn it free too. So now we are empowering the chocopreneurs through education, equipment, and evaluation tools, and we are also working on online Cocoversity for other resources. So we are also trying to develop new machines, but the damper was put by the COVID. But soon we will have some new things, and we want to return to the normal life soon. And we are excited. We just had a DC Chocolate Festival in person after 2 years. It was good to see people in the chocolate industry. And also we are going to have the 𝗕𝚗𝗂𝗋 meeting in US. Anybody is in US or around US, you are welcome. It will be in June 13th in a collaboration with the Fancy Food Show. So we want to meet people. We can do the Zoom meeting, reach people all across the world, but still the dynamics is different when you see people in person. So we are looking for the in-person meetings, even though we will continue the virtual connections. And I just want to conclude with Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. With may all the beings everywhere in the universe be happy and free, and my thoughts, words, and actions of my own life contribute in some way to that happiness and freedom for all. Thank you. Now, Teresa, you can.
Thank you, Mrs. Balu. Thank you very much. Oh, what I would like to do is just a quick little interview to get to know Lauren a little bit better. So this is the sort of standard question I always ask, because I want to know where people started their chocolate journey. So Lauren, can you talk to us a little bit about where your love of chocolate began, or that first moment when you knew that chocolate was a passion for you and it was something that you wanted to pursue? For me, I say as a way of life.
It's funny when you say that, because it is a way of life, but I never thought of it that way when I got into it. Now it is. So yeah, I mean, I grew up eating mostly American mass market chocolate, and I loved milk chocolate, and I loved all that stuff. And I always thought that dark chocolate was really bitter and unpleasant. And my mother would eat the 𝗕𝗂𝗂𝗋 Special Dark, and that was so unpleasant and bitter to me. And so it wasn't until, I was well into adulthood where I started investigating chocolate a little bit more. And I had, I was starting to think about, I wanted to build a community around food, and chocolate was one of the things I was thinking about. And so I actually started, reading and eating a lot of, or tasting a lot of really good dark chocolate. And the first bar that was kind of a revelation for me was at the time 𝗏𝗏𝗏's Madagascar bar. So the Stéphane Bonnat from France, he had a Madagascar bar. He still has a Madagascar bar, but it had those strong cherry and citrus notes, and it was not the bitter dark chocolate I was expecting. And so I thought, oh wow, this is amazing. And I started that journey of continuing to taste, trying many new things. And now I'm sure, like most of you, I eat mostly dark chocolate. I don't eat the, I admit, if somebody were to hand me a Reese's peanut butter cup, I might still eat it, but only when given one. I don't really, I don't eat the mass market stuff anymore. I think that probably goes without saying for most everybody, but it's been such a wonderful journey to have gone from, what I started with chocolate to eating 100% bars that are amazing and really enjoying those. And then also sharing that with a whole community and trying to build, customer knowledge and to tie it into today's topic, but yeah, really sharing that message with people and, being able to say, look, I didn't think I liked it. And look, now I eat mostly dark chocolate and it's amazing. And, I ate good milk chocolate too, but that was really what started my journey. And then, for me, the story of chocolate, the history, the farming, the agriculture and production, the geopolitical issues, all of that it has this amazing story. And I love being able to tell that story and share it with other people and help them understand its importance, both historically, culturally, as a food, everything. I really enjoy that part. And so it had this story that it was really, for me, it was, and we'll talk about this today, but for me, it was being able to tell that story through a retail store and through starting to introduce people to chocolate.
All right, thank you. I have just one quick question. So so you said you were exploring food items. You have a background in, you have a culinary background?
No, I don't. I just love food.
Aha, okay.
I had a retail background. So I actually ran a division of a supermarket chain in Boston many years ago, and had always been in love with food. It was just, just always been a foodie, always really loved everything. So I do not have a culinary background other than being a very good eater.
Aha, okay. Woman after my own heart. That's
there we go.
How my journey kind of went. So that's great. Something that you touched on is really important, is informing the consumer. I think that's really important. So, all right, with that, I will turn the floor over to you, and I'm so excited to hear what you have to share.
Thank you, 𝗬𝗂𝗶𝗹. So I just wanted to thank 𝗬𝗏 and 𝗬𝗂𝗶 for having me today. 𝗬𝗏 and I are both on the board of the Fine Chocolate Industry Association. I'm currently the president of the board. 𝗬𝗏 is the secretary, and we're doing a lot of interesting work, as 𝗬𝗏 said, that I think will be great for the fine chocolate community internationally. So I hope, if you are not familiar with the Fine Chocolate Industry Association, that you all will look into it and join us. And let me just tell you a little bit more about myself. Like, why am I talking to you today? So I'm Lauren Adler, but I started what was a retail store here in Seattle, Washington, in the United States, called 𝗕𝗂𝗶𝗹, and I opened it in 2008. So I had started investigating chocolate around 2006, and that was really when I decided I wanted to do this. At the time, the bean to bar, or the craft chocolate community, there were 5 American craft chocolate makers, I guess 6 if Rogue, Patrick, Amano, Steve DeVries, 𝗕𝗂𝗀𝗻𝗄𝗎, and 𝗬𝗂𝗋. Those were the craft chocolate makers when I opened the store. And then we had, we carried European brands like 𝗬𝗵𝗿𝗄𝗎, 𝗬𝗿, 𝗿𝗏, not European, I mean, obviously Venezuelan. So we were bringing in bean to bar chocolate from around the world, but there wasn't a huge community of chocolate makers doing small batch chocolate. So a lot has changed. So I'm not going to spend much time on that part today, but if anybody has questions, I'm happy to answer about how things have changed and things I've seen. But a lot has changed in the world. As you all know, there's a lot of craft chocolate makers now internationally. It's exciting to see how much growth and community there is, and it's exciting to see how much consumer awareness is developing and has developed since 2008. But today we're going to talk about building a strong customer community. So let me dive in here. Okay, so these are actually pictures of our chocolate community. These are consumers. I thought I'd start with this because it's fun to put faces to the community. And you can see we did a photo shoot one day during the pandemic and just invited our community to come join us. And we have all these wonderful shots. And then and these are people coming to the store and having tastings. But here's what I'm going to talk about today. So I would say that, the 2 key things are creating an engaging experience and building relationships. And the good thing is you've got chocolate, right? So it's easy to create an engaging experience around chocolate. As you know, people get excited when they hear that you're making chocolate. So you've got something to work with. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about how you can use merchandising, curation, so product curation, how you decide what products you're going to carry, or in case of a chocolate maker, what products you're going to make. The sensory aspect, the fact that people love chocolate, and then making sure you have good customer service and how to do that. And then I'll talk a bit more about, how we built relationships, involving all of your stakeholders, your employees, your regular customers, and creating experiences that they can share on social media. I'm not going to spend much time on social media because I'm sure that all of you know a lot about social media and how important it is to building that community. I just threw in a few more pictures because I've got a lot of bullet points. So I want to make sure we had some photos. I particularly enjoy the one on the left. That is 𝗕𝗁𝗁, one of our customers who did cosplay. And so he showed up one day as Spider-Man. And then we do customer happy hours. And on the bottom, you see 2 of our customers, their happy hours. If you know 𝗍𝗏𝗄𝗏, who has been doing a lot on Instagram, he's on the right. And up on the top is Jess Tupper, who also does a lot of social media. All right, so how do we use merchandising tools to build engagement? And I'm going to show you examples of what we did, but let me start by saying, decide on a methodology for your displays. What do I mean by that? Well, I talked about how your chocolate has this amazing story. And I'll show you in a minute, but one of the things I did was we arranged the bars by cacao origin. So like when you walk into a wine store, you know, the wine might be arranged by where the grapes were grown or the grape type, but they're grouped by origin. And so I thought, well, if we want to get across this message to customers that, you know, this is not just your average Hershey bar, it's like really good chocolate and has a story, it has an origin. I'm going to organize the bars, not by brand, but by where the cacao origin is. So go think, and you don't have to do it that way. I'm just saying that there are many ways you could do it, and using your organization in a merchandising context to help tell the story helps get the point across to customers. So there's many ways you can do that, but that's one thing. And I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to show you pictures in a minute of creating, and I will tell you too what we did not do so well. So what I've learned and what I did not do so well. But creating good signage to support the displays. Obviously, you have to have great customer service, but if you're going to merchandise and use your merchandising to create these displays, then you need to make sure you've got great signage that has engaging content, is clear and concise, and is easy to read. If I had to do this again, and I'll show you what I mean in a minute, I might work a little bit more on the clear or the easy to read, and also keeping it simple, which I'm going to talk about. And then, you know, some of these things may seem mundane, but they are really important. Keeping accurate and up-to-date prices and product information. You know, your credibility is only as good as what you have out on display. So, you know, one thing we did at the time was we bought a really nice color printer so that we could constantly reprint our price signs. We didn't mark any of the bars with the, you know, the price gun, because that's a lot of labor. So this way we could just reprint the signs, put them out, and then and put the bars out. And then don't overwhelm. And I highlighted that one in yellow because I would say, as you're going to see in a minute, that's probably something that if I had to go back and do this again, I would change what I did, because, well, so let me get into this. So we had a sign that was a key that sat on a wall. In fact, you'll see it in a minute. And I just pulled out two examples. So, you know, and the sign that I did years ago, I did these signs in 2007. So, you know, there was a lot has changed since then in the world of both genetics and cacao, and we know a lot more. But these were kind of things I put on these keys that sat on the wall. And then, you know, we had an entire section devoted to Madagascar, and it was, you know, had this purple color. But I'm giving customers, you know, here's the kind of flavor notes that are typical, although certainly not the only thing you might taste. And then I talked about, you know, Africa produces 70% of the world's cacao. At the time, I think it was 70. It may be a little bit lower now. So, you know, again, these things have changed. But this was the sign on the left. So those were two excerpts from it. And you can see over here on the left, this was a sign we had. And it was a key so that everything was color coded. But I think it's important when you're creating signs or information like this is first you have to set context. So why are you doing this? Why is it important? Why should the customer care? You've got to make sure whatever you're doing something or telling a story, you've got to set the context and explain why. And why is this important to you? Why do you care? And then design with the user in mind. And that's one of the things I don't think we did that well, making sure it's large enough to read. This is not that easy to read sometimes. Make it centrally located and clear what you mean. So here's a picture. And so you can see I have the sign over there on the left-hand side on the wall. And we had another sign in the middle that talked more about what artisan and craft chocolate were in general, and defined, like said that, you know, percent doesn't tell you anything about the quality. It just tells you the relative sweetness level and, you know, what other ingredients might be involved. So we have these signs, but as you can see, they're kind of hard to read. And the other thing I would say is you can see there's color coding on the bars. So if you look on the right-hand side, you'll see the bars are there's purple in front of them. That was Madagascar, except from this distance, you can't really tell, right? And then you see the price signs on top of that. So if I were to redesign a store today, I would probably work with a graphic designer more so than an architect. At the time I worked with an architect, and build something that was a way to display this. But again, thinking about how do you use merchandising in a way to tell this part of the story is, I think, really important. Okay, so the other thing we did a lot of was product curation. And you know, whether you're a retailer, a chocolate maker, or both, I think this is really important, right? So you want to decide on your point of view. There are some retailers out there, for example, that will carry any craft chocolate bar, no matter what they think of it, no matter, you know, and that's fine. They've chosen to do kind of an exhaustive collection and just have everything available. Alternatively, you could do what we did, which was we curated. So we only brought in things that passed certain, met certain criteria for us, and chose to curate the selection. if you're a chocolate maker, I would say that I would use these in deciding like how many origins or how many different bars do you do. I've seen a lot of chocolate makers try to do a lot of origins and not do any of them particularly well. And I think it's not to say that if you have a lot of origins, you're not making good chocolate. Maybe you are, but it's to say that if you try to do too many things, it's hard to do all of them well. And so do you want to have, and maybe you have a process where you can, and that's great, but you have to decide, do you want to have that exhaustive selection, or do you want something a little bit more curated where you're developing, a couple of different origins and beans that you want to work with consistently, and really focusing on those with your customers. And I'm going to come back to the curation, that, how we curated our selection, because that's been a really important part of how we built community. But let me just say, going back to the history of 𝗕𝗂𝗶𝗹 when we opened in 2008, and there were only 5 American craft chocolate makers. And then we had the Europeans and the Venezuelans and the Ecuadorians. At the time, 𝗬𝗵𝗂𝗀𝗋 had just started in the US and was an independent company. So we had them as well. We didn't have a lot. So that was around 2008. In 2010, we started to see more and more craft chocolate makers making chocolate. And I thought, oh, this is great. We'll just start adding all of them to the collection. But what I quickly realized were some of them were so new to making chocolate that they didn't quite have their process down yet. And I wouldn't call their bars that consumers were willing to pay. At that time, the average price was probably about $7 or $8 a bar. I'd say now it's probably 10 or 12. But consumers were not willing to pay $8 for the quality that was being produced at that time. And so as a retailer, I would order these bars from these new chocolate makers, put them on the shelf, and then my money is tied up in this inventory and they're sitting on the shelf. And my team and I don't really like them. So we're not recommending them to the customers, and the customers who are buying them don't really like them. So they're not coming back for them. So I quickly realized I can't just go add every craft chocolate maker that comes in. We've got to have some curation process. For us, this was really important, to figure out which bars are going to fit for our customers and our collection. I would also say, going back to, there are some chocolate retailers who have an exhaustive selection. They also have a lot more volume than we did. It's easier to have an exhaustive selection when you're in an extremely large city where you've got tons of people coming in. We're in a decent sized city, but it's not New York, it's not San Francisco. We don't have that size or volume of customers. And so for us, we really needed to curate. And again, I'll come back to how we did that in a minute. But when you're going to curate, you have to determine what's important to you, right? Because there's really the 3 S's, I'm going to call them. I made this up while I was coming up with this presentation. I was like, oh, there's 3 S's. I didn't even think about that. There's the sensory aspect of the chocolate, there's the story aspect of the chocolate, and then there's the sustainability aspect. And all 3 of those, I think, are really important in bean to bar craft chocolate, but different companies, I would say, prioritize them differently. So for us, the #1 criteria was sensory. It had to taste good. It had to have complex flavor. It had to have amazing texture. It had to be something we really enjoyed. Obviously, the story and the sustainability piece, we wanted to be there too. So the story is all of you. It's the craft chocolate makers. It's where did the cacao come from? It's the story of the cocoa farmers and the cacao farmers, depending on what part of the world you're in. But so it's that story is really important too, because it brings that sense of place, that meaningfulness to the chocolate. And then the sustainability, because I think all of us in this craft chocolate community care so much about, are we paying farmers more? Is this good for the environment? So I think for us, all 3 of those are important, but for us, if it didn't pass the sensory test, none of the rest mattered. And I'm going to give you an example of why. I would have customers who would go to, they'd travel to France, they'd travel to South America, and they'd meet chocolate makers there, and they'd bring me chocolate back, and they'd say to me, oh, I met this chocolate maker. They were this amazing person. I bought this bar and I was tasting it with them, and they were telling me their story. And, the customer's telling me about this amazing experience they had standing with the artisan who created this product. And in that moment, it was this amazing experience, and they were so happy to buy the chocolate. But then they might say to me, oh, but I'd never buy this bar again, because maybe the bar wasn't very good, right? But in that moment, it was this incredible experience. So I think just being able to, for us, it really had to, the sensory was the most important, and then the story and the sustainability mattered a lot as well. So you have to determine, again, whether you're a retailer or chocolate maker or both, how do those 3 things matter, and how do you rank them for what you're doing? develop an evaluation process for this curation, and that's what I'm going to talk about next, and involve others. And you'll see that was a big part of our process, is involving all of the stakeholders. So, and again, I'm going to come back to that. So I would say, you know, again, you have chocolate. It's you're so lucky you have chocolate. You can appeal to the senses. So you can give customers a chance to taste. We would have bins of chocolate bars behind a, you know, we had a drawer with bins of chocolate bars that were open that we could hand customers samples of. And, you know, we're giving them tiny little pieces. And a lot of times that was on our dime. We would, you know, we'd have bins by origins. We'd have a Madagascar bin, an Africa bin. And if somebody said, I'm not really sure about this bar, we would get out a sample, because at the end of the day, you end up making the sale if you've got something to give them. And so that was really important. And we also scheduled weekly happy hours. We did meet the maker events. And, you know, a lot of the happy hours and the offering samples was a way to also encourage customers to try new things. So, and I'll talk again more about this. So we had a frequent bar club. You could call it a passport. That's something I'd highly recommend if you've got a lot of origins, whether you're a maker, a retailer, or both. But really trying to get consumers to try different things. And one of the things we did with our frequent bar club initially was and I'll show you the card in a minute, but the card couldn't have any repeat bars on it. It had to all be unique bars. And so that way you're encouraging customers to, and when they filled up the card, they got a free bar up to the highest value on the card, but it encouraged them to try many different things. Okay, so here's some photos finally. These were just examples of the weekly happy hours. We'd put out samples. Customers would come in and they'd get to try things. These were meet the maker events. So on the right, we sold bonbons, we sold bars, we made drinking chocolate by the cup. So we had a lot going on. That's 𝗕𝗂𝗋𝗹𝗋 on the right. Up in the left-hand corner is 𝗕𝗂𝗋𝗋𝗋 from Madre in Hawaii. And down, I'm sure many of you recognize down in the left-hand corner, Brian and Dahlia from Fruition. So when people would come to Seattle, we would set up an event and do a meet the maker event. We would do events for our frequent bar club, and you see the card, it was double-sided, so they had to fill up both sides of the card, and then they would get a free bar. But we would bring in cocoa pods, and for those of you in the US, if you want to get fresh cocoa pods, Puerto Rico, they'd have to go through customs, and they come via priority mail. So there's a company there called Montoso Gardens, and at certain times of the year they have cacao, and they will ship it to you USPS priority mail. No customs. So we would always order these for our yearly anniversary event. You can see customers doing that. And again, I'm going to come back to the curation process. This is the first time I've done this presentation, so I'm realizing that if I were to do this again, I might order it a little bit differently, but we'll get to the curation in a minute. So the other thing is offering great customer service. And how do you do that? It really is important to know what skills you're hiring for. So the key thing when you're interviewing people is figuring out if they have really good customer service skills. Do they look people in the eye? Can they have a conversation with them? Do they know what's appropriate to talk to them about? Are they passionate about chocolate? You don't need people who already know a lot about chocolate. You just need people who are passionate about chocolate and have great customer service skills. You can teach them about chocolate. So that's really important. I would say that the most important to good customer service is hiring well. And creating the interview questions to get at those skills. Like, you know, when you're interviewing them, in order to figure this out, you've got to have good questions. And then obviously creating policies that support good customer service. So having clear policies about when can they open a bar to provide a sample to engage a customer. You know, making sure your team knows how you're supporting them to do all that. Oh, okay, somebody's asking, okay, remind me at the end and I'll give you, it's Montoso Gardens in here. And at the end, I'll look up the link online and show you, but that's the Puerto Rico place that you can get the fresh cacao pods in the US. All right, so now I'll talk a little bit more about building relationships. So when I said involve your stakeholders, first of all, involve your employees. This was a group of my employees doing a tasting of a lot of sample bars we had received. I will say I learned quite a bit in this process of involving my employees. Initially, you know, you can see that they can see what the bars are, they can see the wrappers. It was not a blind tasting. And I quickly learned a couple of things. One, do a blind tasting where all they know is the percent and the origin, and I'll come back to that. And two, make sure that when everybody's tasting, whatever your group is, that nobody can say anything until everybody's finished tasting and rating the bar. Because I had one employee, I'm looking at her at this table right now, who put a piece in her mouth and said, "Oh, I hate this." And I thought, well, if anybody else likes it, they're not going to say that now. So one of the key things we did then was in this, and also the customer tasting panel, was you couldn't talk about it while you were evaluating until you were done. And then everything was blind. So then we invited our frequent customers. So this, and this is, we made our own bonbons. And this was actually us trying out product development. So we tried, we created a whole bunch of new bonbons and confections. We invited some of our most frequent customers who we always saw in the store. And we had a night where we put out these prototypes and let them taste them and do little votes and ballots and give us feedback on what they thought of things. And based on that feedback, that helped us decide what products we wanted to carry forward. Okay. So now let me talk about how we involve customers in curating our collection. So, I go back to the photo you saw where we had, so many, probably quite over 100 bars, somewhere between 100 and 200 bars arranged by cacao origin. And I was talking about how in 2010, all of a sudden there were all this chocolate available, and we had to kind of back up and say, okay, wait a minute, we're not taking every bar. We've got to decide what bars we're taking. So, having our employees evaluate was one set of data points, but I realized that, me and my employees was not a big enough data set to be evaluating these bars, and we wanted more input from the customers who really love chocolate. Well, obviously they love chocolate. They were coming to our store. So we invited our customers to participate. We had a list of about 40 regular customers who signed up for this initially, and then over the years, we actually added an application process. It wasn't that complicated. It was more just understanding how passionate they were, because a lot of people would say, oh, I really want to join your customer tasting panel. And we thought, well, if they're willing to answer these questions and tell us about their passion for chocolate, then they're committed to coming and doing the work. We would do monthly tastings of any samples we got from chocolate makers. We would regularly have somewhere between 12 and 20 people participating, probably usually around 15 people. So it's pretty good sample size, plus my employees and me. So, you get a sample size of about 20 people evaluating every bar, and their palates were all over the place. They had many different likes and dislikes. So when everybody rated a bar pretty high, you knew you had a winner, but that wasn't the only criteria. We knew that some people were not going to like certain things. So we did these blind tastings. Initially, I had both the percent and the origin on there, but the panel actually asked me to remove origin because a number of them had some tasting biases where they knew that in general, they didn't like, X country or, as an origin. So they didn't want to be biased when they went to taste the chocolate. So then we just did it as percent. Now, if it was an inclusion bar, we would tell them what was in it, but they wouldn't know the brand. They wouldn't know the origin. They wouldn't know anything other than the percent. And then obviously bars that scored well were considered for adding to the store. I also had to think about price. If a bar was like truly a world-class, really complex bar, then price might not be an issue. But if it was just a really good bar, but it was like, a $12 or $15 bar, I'm like, would I pay 12 or 15 for that? It might be a good bar at 10, but I don't know if I'd pay 12 or 15. So we think about that too. So that factored into it. It depended on how well it rated and the pricing, kind of a combination. So these are actually pictures from a Saturday and an evening tasting. You can see down on the left, that was how we would prepare samples. We'd had a rating sheet right there where we're rating one. And this was the group, obviously on the left in full thought. But this is where you couldn't talk until you'd finished filling out your row on that evaluation sheet for a bar. And then once everybody put their pencils down, we'd have a brief conversation. And if anybody, that you could kind of see if there was consensus or if there were some very diverse ideas or what people were calling out about the bar. So that was also very helpful. Okay, so actually I'm getting towards the end here. It's like speed curation. So I guess, I was saying that I would tell you what I wish I had done differently. I think, let me just back up here. You can see we had a lot going on, right? We had all this merchandising. We had, go back to this. So we had all these bars. We had all this signage. We had all these events. We had Meet the Maker. We had weekly happy hours. We had, frequent bar club. We had everything. And I guess I would say we were trying to do way too much. We had confections we were making ourselves, which were winning international chocolate awards, and we were selling those wholesale. We were making drinking chocolate. It was way too much at too small of a scale. So I would say start by picking some things you're doing really well and focusing on them. And also, I think that helps build community because you can really focus on it. Like we had the frequent bar club. you could call it a passport kind of thing. I think if we had focused on that more and just really gotten out in the community more and promoted it more, that might have really grown our community even more. So I guess I would say, you know, keep things simpler than we did, but choose your merchandising tools. So remember, you want to go back and think about what kind of signage, what kind of story are you trying to tell, and think about how you can use merchandising to do that. Decide on your curation strategy. You know, are you going for things that pass a certain threshold of sensory evaluation? Or are you going to take everything? You know, are you going to prioritize sensory over the story and sustainability, or is story or sustainability more important to you than sensory? You have to decide on that. Use the chocolate to your advantage. You know, like I said, you've got chocolate, you can give people samples, so definitely do that. Hire well, really think about what questions do I want to ask these people? What am I interviewing for? Well, if they're interacting with the customer, if they're not back in a production role, they need good customer service skills. Build your stakeholder relationships, which I do think we did really well. We're still online. We have this amazing community. You know, I still do some online events. I do a lot of corporate tastings, so you don't see those because they're obviously not online, they're private. But I also still do Meet the Maker events online, and I've got a very dedicated group who always show up to those and love them and are still very involved in the community. And I've got amazing friends, and actually some of the people who are part of our community, like I said, you probably know from social media. So I think we kind of helped develop that community, which has been great. And again, keep it simple. So, oh, and if you want to join our community, it is a consumer community, but I hope you'll just go to the website and sign up for the newsletter. And when there is something to announce, you'll get information. So I'm going to stop the share and I'm going to look at some of these chat questions here.